Okay, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangout. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what I do is talk with webmasters and publishers like the ones here in the Hangout and maybe the ones that are watching this video. As always, I'd like to give the people here in the Hangout a chance to ask a first question. Is there anything on your mind before we head through the submitted questions?
I'd love to revisit my question from last week, which is maybe a bit tedious. So if someone wants to go before me, please do. Okay, so as I asked on the last week's, I think last Friday's call, we are having issues, we think, with, well, at least we don't understand exactly what's happening with the way we're tackling hreflang tags for international content because, so just to quickly recap, we're a music video streaming service, so we have lots of music videos, which, you know, essentially they have language, but it's not like text language, and we have the Chrome around that, so the login, the about this site, all that kind of stuff, that's translated into German and English, so we're a German site, and international stuff is in English. And we've been trying to figure out how best to represent that to Google so that Germans see German in the search results and everyone else sees German or English, whichever they would prefer. So in the last hangout, I said that we were doing hreflang X default for and rel canonical for basically all the video play pages. So say Rihanna's Umbrella gets a rel canonical and X default, and we also support sticking HL equals EN or DE as a query string parameter, and they get a rel alternate, hreflang EN, hreflang DE, and the rel canonical stays the same. And you said that you thought that we should change it so that we use the rel canonical to point to whichever of the language variants you're explicitly on at the moment. So if you land on HL equals EN, rel canonical should point to HL equals EN, because otherwise the canonical uses a signal to drop the language variants from the index. And been looking at that some more. So we're seeing actually that Google's behaving kind of the way we expect. So if I go to google.de and set it to German, I get German Take TV pages. If I go to google.de and set it to English, I get the English Take TV pages. And the Google Play Store is doing what we're doing. So it's keeping its rel canonical to the unadorned language. So it's keeping its rel canonical pointed to the X default. I'm just kind of like a little bit confused. Because I'm seeing some of the behavior I expect, but I'm also, you know, your explanation made total sense, and I'm just a bit baffled at the moment, really.
Yeah. So we're sometimes showing the wrong version? Is that what you're seeing? Or?
No, you're showing the right version, but the behavior, after our conversation, the behavior I would expect to see would be that you would only show the German version, because that's what will get served by default to Googlebot if it hits the rel canonical URL. But we're seeing German and we're seeing English on pages that have the HL, EN, HLDE variants listed in the meta tags.
I'd probably have to look at some specific examples to kind of see with these specific URLs we're picking it up or we're not picking up, or we're showing it like this or we're showing it like that. I do know we try to figure out what the webmaster is trying to do. So if you set the rel canonical like that, then we'll still try to figure it out. But in an ideal situation, we have like everything that leads to the same final destination and the same decision on our side with regards to which URL to show. So that kind of helps. But I'm happy to take a look at some example URLs if you have some. If you can send me something then
Yeah.
I
I can do
can
that.
kind of see, is it working as expected? Is it kind of doing what it's supposed to be doing, even though you're not doing it completely the way that we'd expect that? Or are you doing the right thing and we're not picking it up properly?
Yeah, I mean, I just basically want to make sure that we're doing what you expect, and not, like just doing the wrong thing for no good reason. So cool. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Can I jump in with a question, John? I think we need some clarification on deciding what pages we should have on the index. So I think Google's best practice is to minimize thin and duplicated content because of panda-related issues. And we would control that either by canonicalization or noindex or maybe even Robots.txt. Now, I've got a situation where I've got a client and they allow users to sell their own cars. So that generally leads to a lot of pages, content-wise, where they've decided, they can put on whatever they want. And in a lot of cases, it's quite thin content. It's probably the odd bullet point or two. A lot of images of the car, but not a lot there. And that happens across the entire site because, again, I suppose we're allowing the user to decide the content. So on one hand, we can either just allow Google to decide what pages get indexed, or we try and control that. But again, I suppose we really need an understanding of why or how should we control this duplicate or thin content throughout the entire site, because it's not low quality. But I don't know, does Google see that as low quality? We've got loads and loads of thin pages that are very, very similar of the same type of car.
They could be low quality. It's something where I try to look at it from a user's point of view rather than from a very objective point of view where you're like saying, well, there are 20 words on this page which are unique, and there are 30 words on this page that are unique, therefore we'll take the 30-word version instead of the 20-word version, because it might be that sometimes there's something valuable in even a short piece of content. So that's something where you kind of can't take like a single one-size-fits-all approach and say, this is how we should be like filtering the content on our side. Maybe we should be no indexing the lower quality or shorter content. You really kind of need to look at how your users kind of react to that and what they would perceive as being low quality content. So if they came to one of those pages on your site while looking for a car that matches those criteria, for example, would that be a good user experience for them? Would that be something that they'd be happy with? Or is that something where they'd say, well, there's nothing on here that I could find useful or valuable, therefore this was a bad search result for me, and it's Google's fault for sending me to this page. So those are kind of the situations that you should be kind of looking at, or you could be looking at. And depending on the type of site, you might take metrics like the length of the content. You might take metrics like how people respond to this. Do people react to this content? Is there a way for them to interact with the content, like leave comments or vote things up or down or put it on, I don't know, a preference list or something like that? Those are the kind of things where maybe you could collect some signals about what defines good content for your site and use that to, on the one hand, maybe filter the things out that are really kind of useless. If people are posting, I don't know, pictures of stuffed animals on a site that sells cars, then that doesn't really make sense. And on the other hand, maybe kind of pre-moderate things automatically where you're saying, well, I don't know how well I can trust this content, therefore I'll just put it on no index for the moment, and if it picks up over time, then we can always flip that back automatically.
Yeah, I think it seems generally the main issue is that we've got loads of the same type of page, and yeah, so on one hand, yeah, okay, it's going to be quite specific. It might be a type of year or type of, it could be petrol, diesel, etc. So there could be something to identify that specific car that somebody is looking for. So therefore, we are serving the most relevant page. It may be that, but it might be, okay, have got loads of different relevant pages to the same or very, very similar query. And I don't know, I suppose it's quite difficult. So I'll see what you're saying in terms of whether or not that's going to be good for the user. But I think, would it be bad for the user? I mean, if we've just got multiple of the same cars, but they're very, very slight, and for whatever reason, then should I think that needs to be in the index? Does it? Would you say it should be in the index? Because again, I could be very specific about my query and the type of car that I'm looking for.
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe this is the kind of situation where for the most popular makes and models, you have something like a category page instead of the detail pages that get indexed, where you say, well, these are all of this type of car in your location, which we have available, and you can click through and kind of look at them individually or compare them or whatever you need to do there. But that's something where you kind of need to look at it on a per-site basis. That's not something that I'd say like all sites should be doing it like this or should be focusing on no indexing content that might be thin, because for some sites there's some kind of content, like you said, we might want to have all of those different variations indexed because people are looking for something very, very specific, and they need to be able to find that somehow.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me on to my second question, which is very much related. So again, every website is different, and we deal with many, many different websites. We deal with, we've got multiple clients. So I think if we were to kind of tackle it every time we look at this issue, we look at, okay, is this page consistently duplicated? If it is, then maybe we make canonicalize those pages, and then maybe you'll be able to be a little bit, I suppose, accurate in the way in which you crawl the site, and you don't have to use a lot of resource. But if there are pages that, yes, they are thin, but they are very much relevant to that user, then just to really think about the user rather than Google. We're not gonna, we're not gonna have a Panda. We're not gonna really be subject to Panda if we just have loads of thin content, but there isn't a lot to say about that car. Because I think that's where we just want to be very careful that we don't receive any kind of pan algorithm update. We will obviously make every effort to make sure the content, whatever is there, is quality, and the fact that it isn't just going to be, like I just say, kind of just random animals or random content. It's going to be directly relevant content, but there might just be not a lot of it. That's not going to cause us an issue, is it?
That shouldn't be a problem. I mean, there are some really big sites out there that have a lot of content. And we try to look at them overall to see what makes sense here with regards to maybe a new page that we discover on the site. Like, how can we kind of put that? Which bucket should we put it in? Like the probably high quality or probably low quality bucket before we were able to kind of really figure out what this page is about. And that's kind of what we're trying to pick up on here. The other thing that you could also do with user-generated content like that is give the user who posted that content some feedback. And maybe say, well, it looks like this is a really short description. Are you sure there isn't anything more specific that you can post about this article before we actually publish it?
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah, great. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it.
Sure. All right, we have a bunch of things in the Q&A as well, so let me run through those. And don't actually have that many questions in the Q&A, so I'm sure we'll get back to questions from you all afterwards as well. When having URLs with both HTTP and HTTPS in the Google index right now, is it okay to redirect all HTTP to HTTPS from one day to another with a 301, or would you recommend using a canonical tag or kind of doing a slow transition there? From my point of view, I'd rather do like a full redirect from one day to the next. In general, when it comes to site moves, when we recognize that there's really a full redirect from one site to another, we can process that a little bit faster because we can kind of see, well, everything is moving like this, therefore we can assume that it'll be consistent across the site. Compared to other situations where maybe a part of the site is moving or you're moving in separate chunks, those are the ones where we say, well, part of it is moving, but part of it is staying. Like, how should we deal with the signals across the site? We almost have to evaluate the whole destination site step by step again, so that we actually understand how that's kind of the current status there. So if you can move a site completely and at one time, be it from one domain to another or HTTP to HTTPS, that usually makes it a little bit faster, because we'll also be able to pick up crawling a little bit, we'll be able to handle indexing a little bit better, and all of that kind of forwards things a little bit faster than if you do it step by step. I've asked this question a few times, and a lot of times in the forum, no one seems able to help. We're unable to get our mobile site indexed by Google. We've exhausted everything. I probably need a link to the forum thread so that I can take a look there. I'll try to look it up with just the name, but that's probably a bit tricky sometimes. So if you can post a link to the forum thread or send me a note on Google Plus directly, then I'm happy to take a look there to see what's happening. Is there any advantage of having multiple sitemaps instead of a single one? Separate them out by category, or a single one for everything, or one for just images? It's in practice, it's really up to you, whatever works best for you. I like to split up the sitemap file, because in Search Console you can look at the index stats by sitemap file, and that sometimes makes it a little bit easier to understand what types of pages are currently being indexed and what pages aren't being indexed. So you don't see the specific URLs, but you see, like, from the category pages, I have 90% indexed. From the product detail pages, I have 70% indexed. And that might be more useful information than if you just see overall I have 72% of my pages indexed, because that way you kind of have a little bit more granular information. So I kind of like splitting things up, but in practice, from like a technical point of view, on our side, our systems handle both small sitemap files and big sitemap files in the same way. We can process them really quickly, so it's not that you'd have any technical advantage by doing that. I'm working on a project with local context and do some testing with schema.org markup for local businesses. Does Google somehow recognize local business markup already and use it to enrich the search results? Yes, we do pick up some of that markup. I don't know offhand which ones we do pick up. So I know we pick up, or try to pick up, the opening hours, phone number, address information, and we try to use that in the knowledge graph as well. Opening hours is, of course, sometimes a bit tricky, because there are multiple sources of opening hours. On the one hand, it could be on your site. It could be something you submitted to the local business directory directly, and we kind of have to figure out which one of these is the correct set. But you can mark those things up, and we do pick that up from pages. And in general, from talking with the people that work on this markup, that work on kind of the local data extraction from web pages, it really helps them to see more and more sites actually use this markup, because that encourages them to use it more and more on our site as well. Whereas if we don't see any sites using this markup, then we're probably not going to spend that much time on figuring out how to include it in the search results. Penguin 4, are we likely to see it in January? I don't want to make any date promises, but I am hopeful that things are lined up. And since it was kind of on the edge for this year, I'm pretty confident that that's good enough for January, but I really don't want to make any announcements on that.
John, can I just jump in again? Sorry. There in the SEO community, reporting on a potential for we're calling it a phantom update. So on the 19th of November, there were a lot of either positive or negative movements across a lot of key phrases. Now, I don't think we've had any official word off Google, and we've had a look at our clients, and we can see that kind of correlates with around the 19th. Is there anything that you know of that you've done, Google's done on your side at all, that you could probably let us know on?
I don't think we have anything to announce. So we do make we do make updates all the time, and sometimes these updates are more visible than others, but it's not that we give like external names or announce all of these changes. So I imagine what you're seeing there is just one of the updates that we made over time with regards to search quality, and it's not that I would be able to say, well, no, you're not seeing this update, or yes, you are seeing this update. I'm sure we made an update then. We make lots of updates all the time, and some of them are more visible. Some of them are more visible to like niche communities that look at specific sites, and some of them kind of fly under the radar of all of these people, and they're actually pretty big changes from our point of view. So from our point of view, we try not to make too much of a fuss about a lot of these updates because they're just essentially just our work as usual.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thought I'd ask. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, it's always kind of tricky for us when we see a lot of people talking about something externally, and we'd like to say, well, it's this specific change, and it comes from this and that. But a lot of these changes don't have any like clear source or clear actionable effect that we can say, well, this means you need to improve your keywords on your pages so that we think that they actually look better, because we try to focus on the final results, on the relevance for the user.
Right. Cool.
Okay. I think this is actually your question here. You mentioned the other week that it's down to the webmaster's prerogative to decide
So you can take
where it
that.
makes sense to index no-index pages. Yeah.
Pretty much what I'd asked. Yes, I'll put that in there just in case.
Yeah. It's something that's also interesting because when we talk to the search quality teams about this, they're usually saying, well, you shouldn't be no-indexing low-quality content. You should be making it high-quality content instead. And that's easy for engineers on our side to say, but when you have a larger website, that's not always that easy. So that's sometimes using a no-index or finding other ways to kind of de-emphasize that content is an easier move or something that's easier done on a larger scale at least. But if you have a chance to actually improve the quality of the content, then that's, of course, always preferred.
Absolutely. I think it's just marrying up the resource to the size of the website, and I couldn't agree more. I think from my point of view, it's making sure that we're making the right decisions for every site that we look at, and not necessarily just doing it from a Google point of view, but obviously you've got to be thinking about the user point of view, and maybe that's probably what Google's been doing all along, so hence the search results as they are. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I think this is pretty much the same with regards to no indexing content. There's a variation here about Robots.txt. In general, I try to avoid using Robots.txt for thin or duplicated content because it just results in us actually indexing those URLs without any content. So if we can recognize that a page is clearly no index or clearly has a rel canonical or redirect setup, that makes it a lot easier to funnel all of the signals to the right pages, whereas if it's blocked by Robots.txt, then we don't really know what we can do with this at all.
I think, John, with the Robots.txt, I think it's more to do with trying to help Google in terms of the resource that you can apply to every website. So I agree with you in terms of that. But if you have a large area of the website where you know that Google is probably pretty useless for the user and probably useless for Google to crawl, then what kind of situations would you expect us to be using the robots.txt file in? Just to give me some examples.
Good question. I've been trying to figure out like where we could best recommend this, and it's on the one hand the general situations where crawling causes server problems. That's definitely one situation where using robots.txt definitely makes sense. So if we crawl a part of your site that requires a lot of dynamic server interaction and lots of database lookups, where each page takes, I don't know, half a minute to load, that's because all of the servers in the back are running like crazy, then that's probably not something you want Google to crawl, because we'll just bog everything down and make it unusable for normal users. So that's definitely one area where I see robots.txt making sense. That could kind of expand to things like some kind of search results pages as well, where basically any URL would be a valid URL, a valid search term, and you'd have to kind of run through that and figure out what might be coming back. So that's something where sometimes I could see that making sense also for search results pages. For duplicate content, for thin content, I really try to avoid using robots.txt, because we essentially lose all of those signals that we might have for those pages. If you have internal links pointing at those pages, then we kind of lose that internal PageRank that you're passing. If you have external links going there, we lose all of that, because we don't know that we can actually fold these pages together and make one of your existing pages a lot stronger. So putting something like a rel canonical, or even just a noindex if you don't want it indexed, or redirect on these pages and letting us crawl that makes a lot more sense from my point of view, if you can do that.
Is it worthwhile canonicalizing loads of duplicate pages into one? And what if you've got a very slight... So again, if we look at the core example, sorry to take over the hangout, guys, by the way. So for example, if you've got loads of pages, and so for example, you get like a 2-month leasing, 6-month leasing, 12-month leasing, all the content for those pages are exactly the same, apart from one number. Is it still worthwhile just leaving it all just open to Google, rather than trying to canonicalize all these practically duplicate pages into one? What's the best way to kind of handle that? Because that's been always my problem, that okay, great, we've got all these different variations, but only slight, and the content is duplicating page after page after page. Is it worthwhile having one strong page to rank in Google by canonicalizing them all in, so you fold all the pages into one, or just leaving it all open so that, again, Google can understand that there even if it's minute, there is a slight difference between all these pages?
Yeah, I don't have an absolute answer for that. I think the two factors that you mentioned there definitely play a role. On the one hand, if you fold them together, you have something much stronger, which could be a little bit more generic. But if you have like one page that's like 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months on there, that maybe leads to more detail on those individual items, that might make a really strong page to show in search. On the other hand, if you know that people really, really want to find this variation, then maybe separating that out makes sense. So that's kind of the trade-off that you have to look at on your side, from keeping things very strong and focused on like one generic page that you keep indexed like that, or splitting it up into maybe different variations because you know people only really want to find that specific variation. So I guess one example could be if you're selling something and you have one store that's available for resellers and one for general consumers, then you could theoretically make one product page for both of those versions, but it's a very different audience. And they want to find something unique to their market. Otherwise, they'll feel, oh, this isn't what I was really looking for. So you might have the same product just on two websites, one focusing on consumers and one for resellers. And that's something where it definitely makes sense to split that. But there are other situations where you might say, well, it's kind of a similar audience, so maybe it makes sense to fold them together into one stronger page. We'll rank a little bit higher, and we'll just have to make sure that the page works for both of these audiences that are looking for these different variations.
Okay, thank you.
All right. What's the best way to replace an old URL and get a new URL index if both URLs are to be used? So I can't use a redirect or no index, but I want to prefer my latest URL in the search results. Google's not accepting because the content is different. So in general, this would be the type of situation where you'd set up a redirect from one URL to the other, In this specific case, it sounds like that's not easily possible. So I imagine this is the type of situation where you have one main product page and you suddenly have like a 2016 version of this product and you set a separate
Yeah,
page number
John.
for that.
John, I am online.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Actually, the thing was that for last 1 or 2 years, my old page was ranking, but with the time, I wanted to you can say to make a new page for that very same keywords or target market. So I was when I made those changes, my company wanted that old page also to be in search because they were saying that why lose these customers. But so in such case, I was not able to use the redirect 301.
Mhm.
But when I was trying to use canonical, because Google wants the same content on both pages, so even it was disobeying my canonical tag. So this is the thing that I am facing
Yeah.
problems in.
So with the canonical, it would actually be similar to a redirect in that we would focus on just one page and drop the other one. So that's probably not what you'd want. What I would recommend doing there is moving the old content to a new URL and keeping the existing URL for the new content. So, for example, I don't know if you have like a phone or something like that, and you have a specific phone type, like I don't know, this Nexus 5, and you have a new model of this phone, then what I'd recommend is putting the new model on the existing URL and moving the old model to a new URL, and kind of like saying, well, I'm moving the old information to an archive page. So on the one hand, that content is still findable in search, but on the other hand, Google kind of understands that the main page for this specific product is that existing URL. So instead of putting the new content on a new URL, move the existing content to an old URL and use the new content on the existing URL.
But in this case, the URL for old page is not very user friendly. It is like tab ID equals to 3305. So I wanted to optimize that new URL. This is why I was having this problem.
Yeah, so if you want to make changes on the URL structure at the same time, then that always adds more complexity. But what I would do there is first move to like a clearer URL structure, and then in a second step, kind of do that shuffle with the old and the new content so that the new content is on the new old URL, and the older content is kind of moved to an archive position which is linked from that URL, so you can like look at last year's model and you click on it and you find last year's page, but under the separate URL.
Okay, thank you.
So essentially, it's kind of like a newspaper, like a category page, for example, where you see the current content is visible directly, and the older content keeps being moved back into kind of like an archive position where it's findable, it's still around, but it's not in the same place, and it's kind of a separate URL that users can go to. Google can recognize its secondary position now. It's not the primary content for this type of page.
This is the thing quite often we face the problem, like if we want to create a new page with new URL. So we either have to use a three redirect or canonical. But in canonical case, Google sometimes does not obey them because it finds completely different pages.
Yeah. So with the rel canonical, for us, that's a signal. It's not a directive directly. So it's something we look at. And first, in the first step, we have to index both versions, which is sometimes confusing as well. If you have a large number of pages that you're using rel canonical on, first we have to kind of index both versions so that we can even pull out the rel canonical and understand that. So that's something that would happen in the first step. And in the second step, we have to evaluate, are these really equivalent pages? And if so, then can we fold everything into that one designated canonical URL? With a redirect, it's a lot easier because you're really saying, well, there's no content on the old URL, and everything has moved to the new URL. So it's a lot easier for us to say, well, We'll just focus on the new URL because that's where you're redirecting to.
Okay. And John, also in redirection case, should I keep my old URLs in XML sitemap so that Google could see them and then go and find redirect, or just update internal links, my XML sitemap, new URLs?
You can keep your old URLs in the sitemap temporarily. So I would maybe keep them for, I don't know, a couple of weeks until Google has picked them up, and then I would remove them from the sitemap file so that you really only submit the URLs in the sitemap file that you want Google to crawl just now and to crawl to index appropriately.
Means I create a old URLs list in XML sitemap, track it, and when the index pages are 0, then I can remove them
You can remove them from the sitemap file. Just
from sitemap file.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let me run through the last 3 questions here, and then we can open things up for more questions from you all. Is it correct that when there are 2 versions of a URL, or even more, one which canonicalized and one that's canonicalized from, the data from all of these URLs has to be hauled back by Googlebot for merging into one? I'm not sure exactly how this question is meant. But kind of like I mentioned before, first we have to index both of those pages to be able to process the rel canonical. And generally what we'll do is we'll fold all of the signals that we have into that canonical URL, but we'll focus for crawling and indexing on the content of that canonical URL. So if you have one page, for example, about blue shoes, and another page about red shoes, and you say the red shoe is a canonical for the blue shoe, so the blue shoe has the canonical pointing at the red shoe page, then that red shoe page won't necessarily rank for blue shoes type queries because those blue shoes aren't on that red shoe page. So if you want to use a canonical, really try to make sure that the content is equivalent so that you don't lose any additional context that might otherwise be gained from that other content there. While domain name is not ranking signal, why does Google search make queries which are part of the domain name bold, as well as queries in the URL and snippet bold? In general, these are more user-facing type things. So the way that we kind of do the bolding in the search results is something that we do more for the users rather than something that we do for site owners as a sign that this is a critical issue on your site and you need to add that there. So that's something where ranking factors don't necessarily have to mean that this is how we would show it in the search results, because the normal user doesn't really care what a ranking factor is. They just want to understand which of these pages are relevant for their specific query just now. All right. And with that, I think we've kind of finished all of the questions here. So what else can I help you guys with?
Can I ask something?
Sure. Thank
you. We are going to redesign one of our online news magazine, and before we completely release it, we want to test user behavior on it. So we're going to launch it on beta subdomain, for example, beta.newsmagazine.com, and some segment of users redirect to this beta subdomain using temporary redirect rel2. We already put a canonical tag in every page of a beta subdomain pointing to a relevant page on main domain. Like I said before, it is a pretty big website with thousands of pages and a lot of organic traffic. So we really like to avoid indexing duplicate content from beta subdomain. From my experience, I know canonical tag all alone doesn't prevent indexing every time. So I want to ask, should we use both canonical and robots no index do follow tags in every page on subdomain in this case? What do you think?
That could make sense. in general, I try to avoid kind of the conflicting information situation where you're saying these pages are equivalent, but one of these pages has a no index and the other one doesn't. But I could imagine that it might work here in a situation like that where you really want to be sure that none of the beta subdomain is actually indexed like that.
Okay, thank you.
We have a lot of noise. All right, more questions.
Hi, John. I have a question on geo-targeting for country-level domains. So if you want specific landing pages for users in specific countries and you have a country-level domain, how would you set that up?
So you have an existing country code top-level domain, and you want to target other countries, or do you have like separate top-level domains for separate domain names for each country?
No, I want to use a one country-level domain to target other countries. So it's just one domain, but specific landing pages or possibly subdomains for those specific countries.
Okay. So the tricky part here is if it's a country code top-level domain, then you can't set geo-targeting for it. We'll assume that the geo-targeting is based on the domain name already. So if you have a, for example, FR domain for France, and you want to target users in Germany or users in the UK, then you wouldn't be able to use the geo-targeting tools for that specific page in that type of situation. So that's kind of the main difficulty there. If you have a generic top-level domain, then of course you can do that. You can take a subdomain or subdirectory and set geo-targeting for that. With a country code one, you kind of limit it to the country version. You can still make individual country pages, and you can use things like hreflang markup to help us understand that better. But you'd be missing this kind of country-specific boost from geo-targeting.
Would you suggest us changing the domain to a generic top-level domain?
That's always a really big move. So that's not something I would do just for like a random SEO purpose, because there's usually, at least for existing businesses, there's a lot already tied in with an existing domain name. So that's something I'd really be cautious about saying, well, just for this geo-targeting you should move, because on the one hand, it might be that the effects of the geo-targeting for that specific site, for those specific queries, is very small. So it's not that you would be able to guarantee and say, well, if you move to a generic domain, then you'll have like a 10% boost across the board, because it's really hard to say. So what I would recommend doing there is looking at the type of results that you see at the moment for the queries that you're targeting in those countries, and thinking about like how locally specific are these results. Is this something where having clearly geo-targeted content could help, or is this something where clearly geo-targeted content doesn't really have that big of an influence there? So kind of looking at the existing queries, looking at the existing sites that are already there, and making a judgment call based on that, or maybe just making a recommendation based on that, because obviously moving a domain name is a really big step.
And would our local ranking drop if we were to switch to? Would our local ranking drop if we were to switch to a generic top-level domain?
I don't think so. I mean, you'll almost certainly see some temporary effects from that, where if you move from, say, a .fr domain to a .com domain, and you had a section that was geo-targeted for France in there, then in the long run we would see those as being equivalent. So the .fr domain versus the maybe subdomain or subdirectory for France that's set with geo-targeting in Search Console, essentially, those are the same from our point of view, but I imagine in the short term, it'll take a bit of time for things to actually settle down in that sense. So if you want to make that kind of move and you know that your local traffic is really important to you, then I try to pick a time where you traditionally don't have that much local traffic to kind of minimize the problems that you have there.
And the time frame for that?
The time frame, it's there's no real answer for that. It really depends on the site, how well we're crawling the site. I don't know, just from a gut feeling, I'd say moving across with, especially with country-specific geo-targeting sites, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks for things to settle down again. It's really hard to say, because on the one hand, it's not that your rankings would be disappearing completely. You'd still be visible, and you might still be visible with the old URLs, and they redirect to your new ones. But kind of this geo-targeting effect of us understanding this whole site is focused on this specific country, going to a situation where this whole site is just a part of the main domain and it's focusing on that specific country. That's kind of a tricky move sometimes. And essentially, it's not a one-to-one domain move. It's not that you're moving from one domain to another one-to-one, but you're moving one domain to a part of a new domain, and the rest of the new domain might be filled with other content for other countries, for example.
Is there anything else that we could do to our existing site to increase the rankings in specific countries?
So what I would do as a first step is really just make sure that you have the country-specific content available, that you use hreflang markup between those different variations so that we understand which one of these is more relevant in those individual countries. And I primarily try to work just based on that to get started. And if you recognize that, or if you feel that you could make a significant step by going forward and creating a country code or a specific or a generic version that's specific to one country, then that's something you might want to take then. But I definitely try to see how far you can go with just your localized content like that. I mean, there are definitely businesses that are active globally that do have a country code top-level domain, and they're successfully available in the search results as well. So it's not that it's impossible to rank locally with a non-local top-level domain, essentially, but you probably have to work a little bit harder to figure out exactly what you can do that would make it more relevant for users there.
Okay, thanks, John.
Sure.
Yeah, John, related to this CCTLD, I would just take you 2 minutes. Okay, John, can you please tell me what are the factors in CCTLD that Google does not recognize and Google asks us to use hreflang? I am not talking about different languages, but if I have .ca domain, .in domain, .fr domain, so what were the factors in CCTLD that Google was not able to recognize with CCTLD that I have to use hreflang?
There are two aspects there. So on the one hand, geo-targeting helps us to understand which content is relevant for a local user. And hreflang essentially swaps out the content that we show in the search results with a version that's more relevant for the user and their language. So the problem, I guess, with just geo-targeting alone is that we might show one version of the page to a user that's not really the most relevant for them, and we don't understand the relationship between the existing pages on a website. So with hreflang, you're really saying this specific page here is equivalent to this specific page here for this language locale variation, and then we can swap them out where we need them. Whereas with geo-targeting, you're just saying, well, this page here is very relevant here, and there are some other pages that are relevant somewhere else, but we don't understand the relationship between them. So that's something where if we show the wrong page in the search results from your site, that's probably hreflang, which you can work on. If we don't show your site at all for local queries, then probably geo-targeting is something that can help a little bit.
Okay.
I just hear noise from you, Nemanja. Really bad audio.
Could I possibly ask a quick follow-up to Creason and the last question? So, Niraj, so going from a site, so we have a generic domain, but we had only German content on it, and I'm presuming that you had decided that we were German only, and then switching to suddenly having all the content available internationally. What is that? Is there a potential for a significant effect on that when suddenly we're like just totally flipping the tables on you, and then it's kind of confusing? Is there a better way to handle that were we to ever do this again?
That shouldn't be such a crazy change. I mean, these things happen from time to time, and with a generic top-level domain, even sometimes people just change the setting in Search Console and see what happens based on that. So it's not something where I'd say we would get completely confused and like drop the whole site from the search results because someone changed geo-targeting. That's something we should be able to kind of work with.
So basically, John, with the help of hreflang, Google wants to be sure that both are the official websites and indicating to each other in different different locations.
Yes.
This is what Google wants to be sure. Then only wants to swap URLs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a feeling with all these hreflang and international questions, we need to do a separate hangout on this at some point.
Sure.
Still noise.
Oh, I can hear you now. Yeah, go for it.
Excellent. I have to ask about sitemaps. Short question. Does Google look image sitemaps differently? Because I submitted 3,000 pages of sitemap images. It indexed 2,000 pages, but only 70 images. Why? Why did he only index like 0.5% of images? But it didn't index the page. You don't know.
No.
I have to write you an email. I'll send you an email next.
If you can send me the URLs, I can take a look with the Sitemaps team here.
Okay.
Usually they can help me figure these things out. So
okay.
Happy to take a look at that.
Okay, guys. All the best.
Okay. One more question from Don about canonicalization. The canonicalized from and to was more regarding the efficiency of canonicalization. It occurred to me that it's not always the most efficient use of Googlebot's visits. Is it best to minimize? So I guess to use fewer rel canonicals than to use more. I think there are perfectly good use cases for rel canonicals, and for those use cases, I would definitely use it. I wouldn't force like any other kind of technical structure on those kind of situations. So, for example, if you have an e-commerce site and you have products that are in different categories, and the category is reflected in the URL somewhere, then maybe it makes sense to use a rel canonical to one of those versions. It's not something that you'd be able to redirect and say, well, instead of like I go to shoes and then men's shoes and blue shoes and I find the shoe, it would be kind of awkward for me to like end up on a page that's just like a list of blue shoes instead of being able to go back to that specific other category page there. So I would definitely use a rel canonical where it makes sense. I wouldn't use it in cases where it doesn't make sense, where if you're moving from one site to another, then a redirect is probably the right technical approach to handle that situation. So I'd see this as a tool and not as something that's interchangeable with anything else that you're using across a website. All right. It looks like we're just about out of time. If any of you has a last question, I'm happy to take a stab at it.
Can I jump in with one? It's my last one.
Go for it.
Can I confirm that PageRank gets passed through the links on the page and ignores the main navigation and footer links? So anything that may be site-wide, it doesn't pass PageRank through. But is that correct, or?
We essentially pass PageRank to all of those links, even if they're in the so-called boilerplate, like the navigation, the footer, those kind of things. We'd still pass PageRank there. I guess it's a bit of a different situation if you're passing PageRank like across the whole site and you're comparing it to individual pages from other sites, because like the aggregated signals are probably not the same as the sum of the individual signals. But in general, we do pick up links from the boilerplate, from the navigation, from the footer, and we follow them. We pass PageRank through them internally as well.
So would you say that the category pages next in line to the home page generally will be the second strongest page, because you tend to have links from the home page to the category pages in the main navigation?
Sure. I guess in general that would be the case. I regularly come across sites where things like the home page isn't the most popular or most important page. So it's not something I'd say is a requirement for every site, but it's in the general situation, that's definitely how we look at it.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. So with that, let's take a break here. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for all the questions. The next Hangout should be lined up as well. So if there's anything that we missed, anything that's still on your mind, feel free to post those questions there as well. I have a little bit of a longer one planned just before the end of the year, so if there are weird things that you want to talk about a little bit more detail, we can always take those up there as well. And with that, thanks again, and I wish you all a great weekend. See you next time.
Yeah, thank you. Same too.
Thanks.
Bye,
John.
Thank you.
Have a great holidays. Bye-bye.
Bye.